Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Kidney Trails Virtual Summit 2022. We're at day 3, and today I am coming to you outside along the kidney trails. We're out here in the middle. We've got the birds singing, seeing the beautiful weather. I see a lot of trees. I see a lot of woods. It's called kidney trails, right? So we're hiking up to the summit. We're almost at the peak. We're at the third day. Really excited about today, because today not only is it the Kidney Trail Summit, but this is the business portion of the summit. This is something that I am extremely excited about, because we're able to bring you business advice and business things about business from the top in the industry. I think that's just absolutely phenomenal. And especially for those that are looking to start a new business, if you have been in dialysis, if you are somebody that's been transplanted, or if you're just somebody that holds a dream, I trust that these sessions will be extremely helpful to you achieving that. So today we have a wonderful speaker. I met her on LinkedIn through our own CEO, Dwaylen Williams. He actually told me, he said, you need to connect with this individual. She is absolutely phenomenal. She's doing all these things, all these live streams. And so I met her. We went in, I watched one of her live streams. It's like, man, this is phenomenal. Started commenting in the chats. And next thing I know, we're chatting back and forth. And then we actually met virtually in person, is what I like to say. We actually got to meet each other through a Zoom or through another virtual meeting. And after that, she invited me on her show called Pep Talks Live with Tisha Hammond. And she calls herself a small business cheerleader. As Dwaylen said, I am Pep Squad pumped. It's just phenomenal. We're really excited about this. And, throughout, she's been a great supporter of the Kidney Trails. She has a wealth of information and knowledge to share for each and every one of you. And ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I want to give over the session to Tisha Hammond. Tisha, welcome to the Kidney Trail Summit. Everybody give her a virtual applause.
Thank you, Anthony. Thank you to the Kidney Trails community. So happy to be joining you here, and looking forward to the other speakers. The first 2 days have been truly phenomenal, heart-hugging, as I like to say. And there's so much good news to share. And so let's hop right into that. You heard my introduction from Anthony, and I certainly will do my best to give a little more information about who I am and what my company does. So let's jump right into this. I am Tisha Hammond, and a global pep squad calls me a small business cheerleader, the small business cheerleader. The way that came about was that I was blessed to be able to share 21 years of my adult life in the act of service. Blessed to have been able to retire at the age of 41 several years ago, after a 21-year career in federal uniformed law enforcement and then civil rights advocacy. It was really in those roles that I got the opportunity to protect people, to save lives, and to protect people's livelihoods, and to serve and to do things that I did not know were in my capacity to do until those kind of characteristics were brought to the surface and then brought out of me. I got a chance to travel the world, protecting our homeland here and abroad, and to meet fabulous people across a global community who also were willing to serve, whether it be in law enforcement or in commerce or through helping hands in their communities. And so I've been blessed to be able to do some pretty incredible, phenomenal, important things. And I'm sure that I am in the company of others who can say the same. So it's nice to be here in this room, this time, this headspace with you. And I thank you for the attention that you're going to give this presentation. Now, keeping in mind that I spent all of those years in uniformed law enforcement and in civil rights advocacy, keep in mind I am a storyteller. Now, while I am that, those are some stories that I cannot share However, the ones that I'm going to share with you today, I'm going to give my 100% all to. And it's important for you to know that this is an interactive conversation. If given the opportunity to ask a question or to share a comment, please take that opportunity to identify yourself. I am that person who enjoys mentioning other people's names in rooms full of opportunity. We're talking about business, specifically nonprofits today, and being able to say who you are and what you love doing. If this story resonates with you, you never know what that kind of leaving that kind of comment can do for your current, future, or budding business. So keep that in mind. It's good to be here with you today. The stories that I can share start like this. After the unexpected deaths of my sister Charisma and my brother Mickey within a space of 5 weeks in the year 2014, I was moved very quickly to see my dream of entrepreneurship come alive, because theirs did not. On November 29th, 2014, y'all, I literally had a dream. And that might sound cliche or Hollywood. It might sound like I'm trying to elevate myself to a Dr. MLK. It is reality, though, that I literally had a dream on that day. And on November 29th, 2014, I want to share with you what was in the dream. I saw the name of what is now my company. I was still working in full-time civil rights advocacy at that time, but I saw the name of what would become my company. I saw company colors, blue and yellow. Those colors had been a part of my life earlier. They are my alma mater colors at Coppin State University in Baltimore, Maryland. They are my sorority colors at Alpha Nu Omega. I live in the great state of Michigan, so you know what maize in gold and maize and yellow, blue and maize are here in the state of Michigan if you love sports, right? I was familiar with those colors. I also saw an eagle. It was soaring in the sky like this. And that's where those words, the small business cheerleader, came alive. So I'd mentioned that I was working full time, right? And on the day after I had that dream, I went back to work full time for my employer. And that dream kind of like bubbled and fizzled inside until I could no longer stand all of that gut-wrenching activity. And I decided that on the first day of business in January 2015, which was January 2nd, that I would register my company, Ascent Small Business Promotion, LLC, in the great state of Michigan. And this year we are celebrating and have celebrated our 7th anniversary in business. So I come from a long line of entrepreneurs, and I imagine that there are many in this room who could say the same. For those of you who've wanted to dip your toe into the pool of self-employment, to know what it's like to become a founder of an entity, an organization, and you're not yet convinced that you have what it takes to succeed, this message is for you. I want you to start by thinking beyond you and really focusing on community, because that's where your success stories are. Let's get started. After my sister and brother passed, in becoming a business owner, you develop the skill. If you already didn't have it, you develop the skill of being your biggest cheerleader. And so I quickly came to grips with a saying that I still use today, which is the graveyard is where unfulfilled dreams go to die. I'm not satisfied with being unfulfilled. I imagine that's why some of you are here engaged in this conversation as well. You have dreams. You want to see them come to fruition. And you might just be looking for a little affirmation or reassurance or a push or support or some guidance or some mentoring, some coaching, some consultation, some friendship, some community. So you know you're started off on the right foot. Earlier this week, I was behind the scenes producing a live event for a woman that I admire greatly. Her name is Dr. Geneva Williams. She was speaking about how imposter feelings rise up in all of us. It's something that we all have a bit inside each of us. Even Michelle Obama has feelings of imposter syndrome. Even Tom Hanks and even the pure genius Albert Einstein felt self-defeated. I was explaining to Dr. Geneva during her show earlier this week that I have an opportunity to dine with, befriend, have great conversations with people in my industry who are pulling in multi-million-dollar contracts. And I said to her, I don't feel like I'm in competition with their businesses. I celebrate their businesses. The wins that I have are for my business, and they're different from someone else's. And she retorted with one of the most excellent sayings that I'm going to adopt and, of course, give her credit for. She said, you know what, Tisha? We don't compete. We contrast. If you're thinking of developing a business, an entity, an organization, you will be asked, what is your unique selling proposition? Here's the reminder. When that word sounds too technical or too big or too pie in the sky, just remember Dr. Geneva's sayings. Don't compete, just contrast. That's how you will stand apart in this marketplace. And then I want to share with you one other quote before we get knee deep into a conversation about nonprofits and continuum of care and how it relates to the Kidney Trail Summit. I purchased a copy of a great book called Capacity, Women Shattering the Limits. Now, written by Dr. Lisa Wicker. And inside she signed it saying, Tisha, you have the power and ability to accomplish it now. The thing that's been trying to lay dormant inside of me that I am battling with, that you are battling with, that needs to come out on the outside, you have the power and ability to do that now. You have the resources to do it now if you just look to your community. And so, having seen and read and heard the background of these quotes here, I ask you, what do we three women have in common? Well, it's a very easy answer. We all lead nonprofit organizations. So, what is a nonprofit? It's the one that we'll talk about today, at least, is an exempt organization, a charitable organization. It's the one that has that fancy series of numbers and letters that say 501c3 behind it. It's the organization that is birthed and operated for exclusive, specified purposes, generally to be charitable, to give, to give more than it takes, right? To be a blessing to its community. There are other types of exempt organizations that are defined by the Internal Revenue Service, and I encourage you to find out what those are. Today, we're speaking about the charitable type, because that's typically where services that we want to provide to community reside in. I want you to know along the way, I'm encouraging your questions. As you have a thought that's related to the slide or a previous slide, please, if you have an opportunity to put that in the chat, we have facilitators and hosts monitoring the chat. I want to be responsive to you in real time to answer your questions or your concerns about this topic. Again, we're going knee deep now into nonprofits and the continuum of care. And here's my definition of continuum of care. Nonprofit is a pretty popular term. What are these three words? Continuum of care, as I define it, is providing that comprehensive set of services, which can include community-based services that are going to allow for the care and development and evolution over time for a patient, right? So I ask you, do you see yourself creating a nonprofit organization that serves your community in this way? Not transactional necessarily, but where you get to be a part of the development of someone's betterment over time. If you're already serving in a nonprofit capacity, we'd love to hear from you as well. I am aware of organizations that have an affinity with kidney trails that we want to highlight. And I do see your question. And those organizations that stand out and I'm aware of in my mind, if you're represented here, please let us know, are American Society of Clinical Pathology, Creative Health Media, and one I know that is near and dear to Anthony Reed's heart, Adoptees with Guatemalan Roots. If you're represented here and you have a question, certainly we want to highlight you as well. In the chat, we have a question that says, what are some attributes that you should look for in the selecting board members for your nonprofits? This is from Mary Wells. Certainly, we're going to touch on that in a future slide, but we do have an answer for it. So would a host or facilitator please, please, please remind me to answer that question in a coming, in the next few slides. It's a great question, and I thank you for it. We do have an answer. Now, before I get to that though, I want to introduce you to someone. He's not here in this particular company, but he's someone that you need to know about. Every business owner has a story. Every business, every entity has a story. I do as well. I want you to meet Mr. Robert Hill. Is there anyone from California that is tuning in right now? Just throw your hand up or leave a comment. Let us know what city that you're watching from. I had the pleasure of meeting Mr. Hill a number of decades ago. If you can imagine me being that old, a number of decades ago. Yes. And it was brought to my attention pre-pandemic, so we're talking like 2019, that Mr. Hill had been hospitalized. Tugged at my heartstring for certain. In this instance, his hospitalization did not surround renal care. This first round of hospitalization surrounded having multiple strokes. Now, if there is a bright spot in this was pre-pandemic where loved ones could visit, friends could visit hospital systems. What's interesting about Mr. Hill's story is that he spent his career working in a Los Angeles area hospital system. I'm positive it was 35 years or more where he was a central supply technician in a hospital. I remember Redlands, California is in the house. Absolutely. I remember being able to go to the hospital cafeteria and sample little treats here and there. I remember learning what particular types of hospital supplies and equipment was. I remember that he had a passion for making patients in the hospital feel comfortable. He'd be the one that sterilized supplies, that prepared their footies and toothpaste and sterilized equipment for doctors so that a patient's care could be as close to home, if there is such a thing, while you're in the hospital. In his first round of hospitalization, he was hospitalized for 4 months from the effects of strokes. He survived. The pandemic hits. His health declines in a different way. And this time, he is battling his kidneys fighting against him. He is hospitalized during the pandemic for 3 months, where friends, family, associates could not visit. And you're teeter-tottering on the brink of death, and the only person by your side might be your nurse or someone in the nursing profession. And we're thankful that there's a continuum of care, that hospital systems are even businesses that provide this level of care and support and all this wonderful thing. And he survives. And today is returned home and is on dialysis now, likely for the remainder of his life. Now, why do I tell you about Robert Hill? Well, Robert Hill is one of the handful of people that I would donate a kidney to. So when people ask, Tisha, why are you so supportive of kidney trails? Well, it's because my father is on dialysis. And so the organization that you've created, the entity that you've created, Anthony Reed, certainly has hugged my heart in a variety of ways. I've gone on to incorporate my father's story into reasons for fulfilling my own dream, right? So keep in mind that real people and real lives are touched by the work and the care that you provide, whether you are hosting a business or not. There are some great benefits, though, to hosting a business. And when I say I come from a long line of entrepreneurs, certainly my father is one of those. Keep his story in mind, and I'd love to hear how you are connected through the renal journey, the kidney trail story in your family and in your life. We're talking business here. We're talking the organization of nonprofit entities. And so some people have asked, well, does the marketplace really need another nonprofit organization? Does it really need someone who is going to provide those services to fill in a gap for people? It would look like on the surface that enough organizations are already doing that, right? So if you look at this graphic, which is presented by Finances Online, but compiled from sources like the Nonprofit Times, other supporters in the nonprofit space, you'll see that in 2022, there are at least 1.8 million nonprofit organizations in the US. What I want to draw you to is the section that says 2 and then gives the percentages of what space these nonprofits are in, because I want to remind you that we have a duty to care as business owners, particularly if you're about to found a nonprofit. You have a duty of care, and care is ongoing. It continues. There's a need for it repeatedly. Do you see in this infographic that only 7% of this 1.8 million nonprofit organizations in the US serve human services and human services needs? You know what that tells me? Well, I'd like to know what it tells you. You can share that in the comments. What it tells me that is that there's space for you to deliver the care and the solutions that have been on your heart to provide. And the reason I keep talking about heart hugging and heart holding and what's on your heart is because if you are in the headspace of wanting to start a charitable 501c3 organization as a business, it's likely because you are a caring, giving person. So I encourage you, while we have today, while we're working in this moment, we can plan for your nonprofit to be birthed tomorrow. So keep in mind that individuals like my father, Robert Hill, need care. There's only so much that a hospital system can do. There are other gaps that need to be filled in the community's livelihood, in a healthcare system's existence. A family, someone's caregiver, a patient urgently needs what you've been wanting to offer. So, how in the heck do you go about starting a nonprofit today? We're already a few hours into the day at least. What can you do to get started on that way if you're starting from the first step? Well, I would suggest that the first thing you do is attend Sales 101 training. Now, with all the access that you have to social media, to online resources, to a community of resources, I imagine it would not be difficult to find a place that would provide you with the basics, the basic knowledge of what it means to sell. Because even if you are starting a nonprofit organization, you will be a salesperson. And the earlier that you embrace your inner salesperson, the better. So, what does that mean? Well, what sales means to me is that understanding that when you are looking into the eyes of an individual, you're not seeing them as your next transaction or your next paycheck. You're seeing their community. You're seeing their network. You're seeing how to build a long-lasting relationship with that individual that makes them want to introduce you to someone else, where they afford you the time and space in their life and in their busy schedule to tell the story of what impresses you, of how you want to help, of how you're able to help someone through your network, through your resources, through your nonprofit. You, in turn, build the relationship by giving them time and space and attending to their needs and their desires. And really, Sales 101 is about relationship building. And no, you don't have to go to school for it, but the more you know, the farther you go. The second step that I would suggest that puts you in the path of starting your nonprofit today would be to formulate what you will do with the funds that come in to your organization. That means create a formula for how you are going to save or dispense income. Because nonprofit organizations are businesses. And just because they have the term nonprofit in there doesn't mean you don't go out seeking to bring in substantial amounts of funding and financing into the organization. You do, and you should. When it comes in, you want to know where to disseminate it. I have created a formula, at least what I use in my company, where a percentage goes toward tithes and charitable activities. A percentage goes to my salary. A percentage goes to wages for my team. A percentage goes to paying the self-employment tax, which is currently at 15.3%. So while it's nice to have profit, just make sure you're setting at least 15% aside, because Uncle Sam is going to want some of that depending on what kind of organization that you incorporate. And then, of course, you want to set aside some of that percentage of incoming finance to return into your business to help grow it. That's your marketing. And then, of course, you want to set aside some for benefits and retirement, savings. You can create a formula, is what I'm suggesting, for how the cash, the finances that come in will be utilized. You want to know these things before you start collecting finances, funds, donations, support, in-kind donations into your organization, right? And so for what comes into a nonprofit organization, you have to imagine that it costs money to run the organization. So you have to be able to project how some of that money is going to leave your organization. What's the output? What are your expenses? This may be April of 1 month, of 1 year. What does it look like? What do your expenses look like come July of the same year? So these are cash flow and output projections that you want to have a good idea about even before you open for business, right? The third step that I would suggest for getting on your way to starting a nonprofit organization today is getting to know the Secretary of State for your state, because it's typically in that state-run Secretary of State office that your business will become an entity. And that's how you actually register a business, where you start taking advantage of tax deductions and all of the great benefits and perks that come along with ownership of a business or an organization. I'm going to pause here to answer questions that have come in. So we have a question from Mary Wells, and I haven't forgotten about the board of directors question. It will get answered on the next slide. But this first question says, can a profit have a nonprofit for a particular offering to a community? I think I might need you to rephrase the question for me so that I can give a worthy response. So I might be misreading it, but please rephrase the question and I'll be happy to answer that so long as I can see it come back in the chat. If there are any questions or comments along the way, please continue to add them. I've listed 3 steps to start your nonprofit today. Now, these are aspirational, these are ongoing, these are things you want to put time and energy and attention to in advance. These are doing some research, right? This is your pre-work. Now let's talk about some meat and potatoes, some very substantial things that you'll want to do to get your nonprofit organized. I just say, remember the acronym AFA, AAFA, which are the first letters of the words on lines 4 through 7 here. It will be incredibly important for you and your team to conduct a needs assessment. If anyone here has conducted a needs assessment, please let us know what you have done by way of that. People want to know, how long might it have taken for your organization to do that? You know, is it really as ongoing as people say it's supposed to be? Give them some of your perspectives and insights as well. In general, here's what you want to know about assessing the needs of your community. So a needs assessment is really a process for how your team is going to determine if there's an actual measurable need for the problem that your nonprofit organization wants to solve. So, for instance, let's say that your nonprofit organization wants to create color crayons. Now, saying the word crayon is difficult for me because I just say crayon, but I'm trying to be perfect here. There's no perfect, there's just progress. But you get what I'm saying. If I say crayon, you know that I mean the color thing that you use to color pages. Your organization wants to create crayons for children's schools. That's it tugs on your heartstrings to create crayons for children's education, so they can have utensils to use during their school day. Now, I'm not saying there's not a need for crayons. I'm just saying, if you work in an affluent community where the children in your school system have access to several hundred unopened boxes of crayons inside the classroom, is that something that there's a real need for you to do? Those are the kind of things you want to think about. Like, who else is in this space already doing some of those same things, right? So to create your needs assessment, this is what you and your team want to consider. You want to be able to describe the need, the pain point, the problem that is happening around you or in a community that you want to serve. Be able to describe it with some clarity, right? And the further you can simplify something, that really demonstrates that you really understand it. So if someone asks you a question and you take like 5 minutes to explain it versus 12 seconds of clear, concise content, you want to be able to define something very clearly and concisely when it comes to this needs assessment you're going to conduct, okay? You and your team are going to conduct. You want to be able to quantify the need. Nonprofit organizations are most certainly a business, and they thrive on data. So being able to come up with numbers, measurements is very important in any business, certainly a nonprofit organization, because you'll have some reporting requirements that will need data, right? You want to identify who else addresses this same need. In this instance, keep in mind, is some other nonprofit organization already providing the same type of color crayons that you wanted to provide? Someone else already filling the need in that same space. Is that person a competitor, or does that business complement the services that you want to provide? Because not everyone who does the same thing or something similar is necessarily a competitor. They might be someone who you can collaborate with and maybe still be able to share those color crayons with that school that you wanted to share. Okay, I know we're talking not just about kidney care, we're talking about ways to care in general for long periods of time for your community. Okay, so keep that in mind in this conversation as well. Identify next who you're really serving. Does the product or service that your nonprofit wants to provide or give out, is it for the child? Is it more for the parents' benefit? Is it for the educators' benefit? Or is it more because it makes you feel good to do that, right? So you don't want to be self-serving. You definitely want to be able to identify who you're serving. It's got to be someone other than you and your teammates. And don't you worry, I'm getting back to the first question that was asked about the board of directors. Okay, so in conducting this type of thing, I keep saying team, because if you start your nonprofit off with one person, you, the founder, you're going to face some burnout. You're going to face some tough challenges alone, and that's not what business is meant for. When it comes to caring for the needs of a community, it takes teams of people to do this. That's why you will have a team. You must have a team. And this team should be committed to the mission, vision, and goals of the nonprofit organization. We'll get to that in a second. The team is going to have to listen to the community. You're going to have to do some polling, some surveying, some using social media tactics to figure out where the pain points are and what the challenges are and how you can be responsive to that. Host a community forum, town halls, those things like that. Invite the community to where you are. Go to where the community is, where you can find the most people at one time and have a great conversation with them. Knock on doors. Rent an ice cream truck in a park and watch the people come to it. And you get a chance to be really creative. And something that won't cost you any money to do, but will cost a substantial amount of time, I'm sure it'll pay off with resources though, is for you to just ask your legislators, where can you fill in the gaps? in the communities that they serve because they have their ears to the grind, right? So this is part of developing your team as well. Question has been asked, can a business owner have a for-profit and a nonprofit? You sure can. You can also have a blended for-profit and nonprofit, which is a whole new type of entity. You probably want to ask your tax attorney, your accountant, your lawyer about how to formulate those hybrid type of businesses that are both for-profit and serve a social enterprising need. But there are plenty of business owners who have a for-profit business that feeds into supporting the activities of their nonprofit organization. Yes, you can have it both ways and do both. And I would suggest you have a team, and probably different teams for both of those type of ventures. Next up, number 5, you want to assess the market. Okay, that means, you want to analyze the market. That means do a market analysis. This really is mandatory. I haven't talked much about business plans because I don't like that word. I like to call it a growth plan for business. And yes, a nonprofit organization, once again, is a business. You want to have a growth plan for business that includes your needs assessment and your market analysis. This is really where you're going to have your projection, your summary of your financial and your volunteer support. How you see that pouring into the nonprofit organization, right? And I want you to speak that. Finances are flowing, support is flowing, is pouring into the organization. I believe in manifestation, and I believe in positive affirmations. I'm also a very realistic business owner at the same time, and know that you build up to these things. And if you start with a firm foundation of support from someone in addition to yourself and your own pocketbook or wallet, then you're off to a better start than many. So upfront, just as if you are a for-profit business, you're identifying your target audience, your target market. In this instance, to analyze the marketplace, you'd be identifying your ideal supporter, your ideal donor, your ideal volunteer. So just like your business, you've identified the persona of your ideal client. You want to do the same thing if you're in the nonprofit space. What is your ideal donor or ideal corporate sponsor, at least the person that makes the decisions for the money in that corporation? What keeps them up at night? What tugs at their heartstring? Are they grandparents? Do they love pets? What are characteristics about where they live? Are they inherently wealthy and choose to stay in an inner city that has less access to resources when they could live somewhere else in a gated community? What keeps them where they are? What do they aspire to do in their future? What is their income level? And I don't call this being nosy. I call it being resourceful and really understanding who you ideally are trying to attract into your nonprofit space. What is their profession? What's their livelihood? Do they go out for drinks after work, or do they go to the library? All of these points are going to help you solidify who you're going to market the nonprofit to. It is a business. And now, the first question that we had was about the board of directors. I'm going to go back to that. And that was from Mary Wells. She said, what are some attributes that you should look for when selecting board members for your nonprofit? I'd love to hear comments from others who've also had this same experience recruiting those founding members of your board, or having to recruit a new slate of board members for an existing organization. If you are starting at level 1 and you have not yet formed your organization, if you have a nonprofit organization, you will need to have a board of directors. You cannot operate it solely in a vacuum. It has to have some level of insight. So board of directors or board of trustees, you want to have individuals who will tell you no. What do I mean by that? I currently preside over 2 nonprofit boards. The first is the National Association of Women Business Owners Excel program. Excel meaning encouraging excellent, creative, educated leaders. Our mission, our charge is to mentor young female entrepreneurs to consider entrepreneurship as a career path to financial independence. The second nonprofit organization that I preside over is the Society for the Reinstitutionalization of Storytelling. Both of those hold substance in my heart. Mentoring, on the one hand, provides me that external contentment, satisfaction, joy in sowing seeds into some young person's future who wants to be an entrepreneur. That covers entrepreneurship and youth for me, right? And that's deeply satisfying. I'm out in the community. It feels great going into schools with our team, and we're partnering with school systems to help provide programming and resources, beginning with girls in middle school. And we see them through their high school career and into their college career if they'll have us. The second nonprofit organization also tugs at my heartstrings on an internal level. It's to keep transforming lives one story at a time. So as a storyteller, as a speaker, this resonates with me in hearing other people's stories and making sure that people across this nation, and thank goodness virtually now, have access to storytelling platforms. When you are looking for your initial board of directors, you want to be prepared to sit at the table with people who will not always say yes. Because when everybody in the room says yes, while this could be a great idea that you're coming up with, it helps to have a diverse set of perspectives at the table. The different skill sets that you might want to look for are individuals who actually understand money, finances, sponsorship, relationship building, law, bookkeeping. People who enjoy speaking in public, people who enjoy doing administrative work, people who are organized in their personal and professional lives, people who can communicate through technology in collaborative workspaces, who are interested in learning new things, who are inviting and welcoming, who can see the future of your nonprofit organization in their life, and who are not there because you simply ask them. Because if you ask someone to join your board of directors, and you really need someone who's written grants and secured grants before, and you ask your neighbor because you love them, you trust them, they've picked up your mail before when you've gone on vacation, you give them the key to your house, and you know, they give you the key to theirs when they go away. But can they write a grant? Can they secure $25,000 in funding? Can they introduce you to someone who has access to those skill sets or resources? So when you're developing your board of directors, rather than seek someone who is your friend or your family member who loves you, seek people who love the mission of the organization. If you have a personal story that you want to share about that, we'd love to hear it. And thank you for the comments coming in about what is resonating with you and what, how we have these things in common. I have here on number 6 also to revisit the SOS. That's the Secretary of State. One more thing about the board of directors. There need to be officers on the board. There need to be bylaws. There have to be articles of organization. You'll have to create meeting minutes when you meet. This is what being a board of one doesn't work. You don't meet with yourself. You have to meet with real people and like really record what was talked about and have agendas and actually make progress in the organization and do high level strategy. The board of directors has to have officers. You have to have a president. You have to have a secretary. You have to have a treasurer. So you get to define how many people, the maximum number of people you'll want on the board, and then other members can be in various roles, but you got to have officers. You want to have an executive committee. And we can talk more about that offline if you're interested. And for now, though, I'm encouraging you to revisit your Secretary of State, because it's the Secretary of State that is going to give you additional resources when it comes to supporting the launch of your nonprofit organization. I know that I'm getting short on time. I just have 3 more slides to go through, and I would love to have more questions and maybe some real life conversation before my time is up here. So just remember, if you've never visited the online site for your Secretary of State, it's available in an online search. Tap into their business entity, business registration, business search. You want to open a company, a business that doesn't have the same name as some other company or business in your state. So you might have created this fabulous business name that somebody already has in your state, and you might have to be okay with changing it a little bit. Those are things that you and your team work through well in advance. It literally doesn't take much time to officially open or launch a business or a nonprofit, until you want to start working with the Internal Revenue Service when you apply for your tax exempt status. You might find that there may be a little more activity, a longer wait, a new battle with patience where you have to pack your patience sometimes, because if you are asking the government to exempt you from having to pay certain taxes, that comes with some responsibility on your part too. So apply for tax exempt status after you've registered your nonprofit organization with your state. And then, y'all, keep in mind that help is always around you. I started this by saying, think beyond you. If you are trying to get into a nonprofit space, it must be because you want to serve community. So surround yourself with a community of support and resources as well. You're going to find that in the IRS. There's tons of information just for charities and nonprofits. It's going to require you to read a lot, or have something read to you, whatever way you prefer. If you want to file for tax exempt status, then you should be familiar with Form 1023 EZ. Just like if you're filing for personal taxes, there are easy ways to do it. If you're a smaller nonprofit organization, you might be striving to be a large nonprofit organization, and I commend you. There are different circumstances that come with that. Still Form 1023. Keep that in mind. Visit these links here. Stay exempt. You don't want to lose your tax exemption once you've gotten it. So there are ways to learn how to keep it and maintain it. Remember, you have support from your Secretary of State. Look to your local offices of economic development. They have directors and staff there that are helpful in introducing you to your ideal supporter, donor, volunteer, a business that wouldn't mind sponsoring or supporting your nonprofit in some kind of way. They might introduce you to your next best friend in business. You never know. You may want to become part of your local or regional chambers of commerce. It's a way to market the business and develop relationships. course, you want to join business associations because nonprofit organizations are what? They are businesses. You want to bring in substantial amounts of finances, whether you have the term nonprofit in your name or not, and lean to your social media networks. That's where Anthony Reed and I met, and certainly you'll have some great successes there. Now you started the business. Now, how do you get more attention so that you can serve more people more often for longer periods of time? Well, you got to be able to pitch your story. Every business has a story. You'll find what yours is. You got to find somebody to tell the story. Is that going to be the founder of the organization? Will there be someone who's the face of the organization? Will you have an ambassador? Don't you love those Shriner Hospitals commercials? You hear from the patient themselves who's receiving all of the support from the community. That's a beautiful thing to see. Might that be what you choose to do? Then you want to see, how many different platforms can you share your nonprofit's story on? Are you going to take the center stage? Right? Are you going to show up in news interviews with your favorite local reporters? Or are you going to be on Good Morning America one day? Do you want to show up in magazines because that's where your ideal donor is reading? Do you want to be heard on the radio or in podcasts? Do you want some influencer across your favorite social network to be an ambassador for your brand? These are things you get to come up with. And then, you want to always be able to identify what's in it for the other person. Why should what my nonprofit is doing, why should it resonate with them? That's where you tug at their heart. That's where you find out what keeps them up at night. What pains them? What causes dis-ease or unease or discomfort or that comfort for that individual? How can you speak to that with the solutions that you've offered? And then I want you to gift wrap complete stories and storylines for your media contact list. Reporters don't mind having whole stories delivered to them. And certainly you'll want to have a writer, a creative writer on your board of directors, or at least hire someone, or maybe bring in an intern who has those qualities to help wrap all of this together to get your nonprofit recognized more often, faster. It'll accelerate your growth, endear others to you, help you show up out front and in the news. If you want to continue the conversation with me or the team at Ascent Media Production Network, then here's our contact information. Hope that you'll join us on Instagram at Ascent Media Pro. Here's the email address, help@ascentmediapro.net. I'd like to thank Mary Wells, who is on the team, for being here with us. And thank you, Anthony Reed, for the opportunity to help others share their stories.
Awesome. Great job. I really appreciate you coming on here, Tisha, and sharing your insights and your wisdom on starting a nonprofit. And I can tell you, we've had people from we've had some people from Africa tune in, some people from all across the world. So it has got a lot of good comments, people saying good morning, people just really excited to be here and really being able to learn. So we appreciate that. We appreciate your time. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I don't see any more questions in the comments. If you'd like to continue the conversation, please don't hesitate to reach out to Tisha Hammond on LinkedIn or any of our other social media channels. Tisha, we'd like to thank you for coming here and speaking at the Kidney Trails Virtual Summit. We appreciate it. And to all those out in the live streaming world, we're going to go ahead and end here and get ready for our next session talking about financials. So look forward to seeing you there.